Captain Sarah stared at the holographic display floating before her, the blue light casting shadows across her weathered face. The numbers didn't lie, but she wished they would. 37 billion souls across 12 human colonies, and the Galactic Council had just sentenced them all to death. The communication from the Council had arrived 3 hours ago on Luna Station, humanity's primary diplomatic outpost. The message was cold, clinical, delivered by Ambassador of the Confederation with all the emotion of a weather report. Humanity had been deemed a galactic threat due to their aggressive expansion patterns and unstable psychological profiles. The verdict was unanimous among the 43 member species of the Council. Immediate termination of the human species was authorized. Sarah rubbed her temples, feeling the weight of her 45 years and the burden of command. She had been the ranking human officer at Luna Station when the message arrived, making her the fact military leader of humanity's response. Her small crew of technicians and diplomats looked to her now with a mixture of hope and terror in their eyes. "Ma'am," Lieutenant approached her workstation hesitantly. "We've received responses from Earth Command and all 12 colony worlds. They're requesting immediate instructions." Sarah nodded slowly. The faster-than-light communication network that connected human space was both a blessing and a curse. Every human settlement now knew about the Council's decision, and panic was spreading like wildfire. She could imagine the chaos erupting across New Tokyo on 442B, the mining riots starting on Titan, the desperate evacuation attempts from the agricultural world of Harvest. "What's our current military status?" Sarah asked, though she already knew the answer would be grim. Commander Price, the station's intelligence officer, pulled up another holographic display. Red dots representing human military assets scattered across a three-dimensional map of local space. "We have the 3rd Fleet stationed at Earth, about 200 ships total. The 5th Fleet is protecting the outer colonies, roughly 150 vessels. Various patrol groups and system defense forces bring our total to maybe 400 combat-capable ships." Sarah felt her stomach drop. 400 ships against the combined might of 43 galactic civilizations. The smallest council member, the Peaceful Collective, had over 1,000 vessels. The largest, the Empire, commanded fleets numbering in the tens of thousands. "Time until the council fleets arrive?" she asked. "Intelligence estimates 72 hours, Price replied. "They're mobilizing everything. Our deep space monitoring stations are picking up massive fleet movements from every corner of the galaxy. This isn't just an invasion, it's an extermination." The room fell silent except for the hum of the station's life support systems. Sarah closed her eyes and thought about her daughter back on Earth, probably sitting in her university lecture hall, unaware that her species had just been marked for extinction. She thought about humanity's brief but remarkable journey to the stars, barely 2 centuries since their first tentative steps into space. The irony wasn't lost on her. Humanity had joined the Galactic Council only 50 years ago, eager to take their place among the stars alongside ancient civilizations that had mastered faster-than-light travel before humans had even discovered fire. They had been welcomed, initially, as a curious young species with potential. But that welcome had soured quickly. Humans expanded too fast, the other species claimed. They established colonies in contested regions, pushed boundaries that had been stable for thousands of years, asked too many questions about council decisions that were supposed to be accepted without debate. Most damning of all, they had a tendency to solve problems through violence rather than the careful diplomatic negotiations favored by older civilizations. The final straw had been the incident 6 months ago. A human research vessel had discovered an abandoned Forerunner facility, technology left behind by a long-dead civilization that predated even the oldest council members. When the council had demanded humanity turn over the facility for proper study, captain of the research vessel had refused. The standoff had lasted 3 days before had destroyed the facility rather than surrender it. The council had called it an act of barbarism. Humans had called it refusing to be bullied. The gap between human and galactic thinking had never been clearer. "Ma'am," spoke up again, "Admiral Harrison is requesting a direct communication link from Earth Command." Sarah straightened her uniform and activated the long-range communicator. Admiral Harrison's face appeared on the screen, his expression grim but determined. Behind him, she could see the organized chaos of Earth's primary military command center. "Captain," Harrison's voice was steady despite the circumstances. "I'm sure you've reviewed the tactical situation. We're facing complete annihilation. Yes, sir. 400 ships against what intelligence estimates could be over 100,000 enemy vessels. Harrison nodded grimly. The civilian evacuation plans are hopeless. We can't move 37 billion people in 72 hours, even if we had somewhere to take them. The outer colonies are too far from Earth to provide mutual support, and frankly, there's nowhere in human space to hide. Sarah waited for the Admiral to continue, knowing there had to be more to this conversation than a simple acknowledgement of defeat. However, Harrison continued, and Sarah caught a glimpse of something dangerous in his eyes. We've been analyzing the Council's historical military doctrine. They've been the dominant power in this galaxy for over 10,000 years. Their tactics, their strategies, even their technology, it's all based on fighting other civilized species who follow the same rules of engagement they do. Sir, they've never fought humans before, Captain. They've never faced a species that considers a 50-50 chance of survival to be pretty good odds. They've never encountered an enemy that would rather die fighting than live as slaves. They think they know us because they've read our diplomatic reports and observed our expansion. But they've never seen what humans do when we're cornered. Sarah felt something stirring in her chest, a familiar feeling she recognized from her days as a young officer fighting pirates in the outer system. It was the feeling of a long shot, a desperate plan that might just be crazy enough to work. What are you proposing, Admiral? Harrison's smile was sharp as a blade. The Council expects us to either surrender or make a desperate last stand at Earth. They're planning to sweep through our space systematically, destroying each colony in turn before moving on to the home system. Standard siege doctrine. He paused, letting the implications sink in before continuing. But what if we don't give them what they expect? What if instead of defending our territory, we take the fight to them? What if we make them pay such a price for our destruction that every other species in the galaxy will remember the cost of underestimating humanity? Sarah's mind began racing. It was insane, suicidal, and completely against every principle of military strategy she had ever learned. It was also perfectly, utterly human. You're talking about abandoning our colonies, she said slowly, letting billions of civilians. I'm talking about giving those civilians a fighting chance, Harrison interrupted. If we try to defend everything, we'll save nothing. But if we concentrate our forces and strike at the heart of the Council's power structure, if we make them bleed for every human life they take, maybe we can force them to reconsider. Sarah looked around at her crew, seeing the same desperate hope flickering in their eyes. It wasn't really a choice, she realized. They could die on their knees, begging for mercy from species that had already decided humanity's fate, or they could die on their feet, showing the galaxy exactly what humans were made of. What's the plan, sir? Harrison's smile widened. We're going to do something that hasn't been attempted in galactic history. We're going to assault the Council. The words hung in the air like a challenge to the universe itself. The Council was prime, the seat of galactic government, protected by defense platforms that could destroy entire fleets and surrounded by the most powerful armadas in known space. It was considered absolutely impregnable. It was exactly the kind of impossible target that humans specialized in. Sir, Sarah found herself saying, when do we begin? Immediately. Every ship, every weapon, every human willing to fight is being recalled to a staging area in the Wolf 359 system. We have 60 hours to prepare the most audacious military operation in human history. As the communication ended, Sarah looked out through the station's viewport at the stars beyond. Somewhere out there, the combined might of the galaxy was mobilizing to destroy her species. In any rational universe, humanity's story should end in the next few days. But humans, Sarah reflected as she began issuing orders to her crew, had never been particularly rational. And that might just be their greatest strength. The Wolf 359 system had never seen anything like it. Over the course of 48 hours, human ships had arrived from every corner of occupied space, creating the largest military gathering in human history. Captain Sarah stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, Admiral Harrison's flagship, watching as the final stragglers of humanity's fleet took their positions. 437 ships hung in the void around them. Massive dreadnoughts from Earth's Third Fleet floated alongside converted cargo haulers from the outer colonies. Sleek destroyers designed for deep space patrol shared space with mining vessels that had been hastily fitted with weapons. It wasn't the largest fleet ever assembled, but Sarah had never seen one that carried so much raw determination. "Final count is in," reported Commander Torres from the communications station. 437 combat vessels, approximately 200,000 personnel. Every single ship volunteered for the mission. Sarah wasn't surprised. When Admiral Harrison had broadcast the plan to every human military unit, the response had been overwhelming. Not a single captain had refused the call. Even more remarkably, when civilians had learned about the desperate mission, cargo ships and passenger liners had arrived at Wolf 359 asking to be armed and included in the assault force. Admiral Harrison emerged from his ready room, his face showing the strain of the past 2 days. He had been in constant communication with military leaders, colonial governors, and the hastily formed civilian resistance committees that had sprung up across human space. "Admiral," Sarah turned to face him, "the fleet is ready for final briefing." Harrison nodded and activated the ship's general communication system. Every screen in the fleet would now show his face. Every human warrior would hear his words. "People of Earth and the colonies," Harrison began, his voice carrying across the void to reach hundreds of thousands of souls. "In 8 hours, we will attempt something that the Galactic Council believes is impossible. We will strike at the very heart of their power and show them that humanity cannot be simply erased from existence." Sarah watched the faces of her bridge crew as they listened to their admiral's words. She saw fear there, certainly, but also something else. Pride. The fierce, stubborn pride of a species that had clawed its way up from caves and stone tools to challenge the masters of the galaxy. "Make no mistake," Harrison continued. "This is a suicide mission. The Council is defended by technology that is thousands of years more advanced than our own. We will be outnumbered by factors that make our situation here look favorable. Most of us will not survive the day." The Admiral paused, letting the weight of those words sink in before continuing. "But we will not die quietly. We will not fade away into galactic history as just another failed species. When they write the records of this day, when they tell stories of what happened when humanity stood against the galaxy, they will know that we faced the impossible and charged anyway." Across the communication channels, Sarah could hear the voices of ship captains acknowledging their orders. The Artemis, commanded by Captain, who had lost his entire family when the Council's advanced scouts had attacked the agricultural world of New Eden. The Thor's Hammer, an ancient dreadnought whose captain had come out of retirement specifically for this mission. The Rising Sun, a converted freighter whose crew included 3 generations of the same mining family. Each ship had its own story, its own reason for being here. Together, they represented the best and most desperate hope of their species. "The plan is simple," Harrison continued. "The Council believes there is impregnable because no one has ever been insane enough to attack it directly. Their defensive doctrine is based on meeting threats in deep space, far from their core systems. They expect us to make our last stand at Earth or attempt to hide among the outer colonies." Sarah brought up the tactical display on her console, showing the route they would take to Prime. It required passing through 12 different star systems, each potentially containing Council patrol fleets. Under normal circumstances, it would be impossible for such a large force to move undetected. "We will be using a modified jump drive protocol developed by our scientists over the past 48 hours, Harrison explained. "Instead of the standard entry points that Council forces will be monitoring, we will emerge from hyperspace directly in the system's outer asteroid belt. This will give us approximately 20 minutes before their defensive fleets can respond." 20 minutes? Sarah felt her stomach tighten. 20 minutes to fight their way through the most heavily defended system in the galaxy and somehow damage the seat of galactic power enough to make their sacrifice meaningful. "Our primary target is the Council Assembly Complex," Harrison announced. "If we can destroy the building where the galactic government meets, where they made the decision to exterminate our species, we send a message that will echo across the galaxy for thousands of years. No species will ever again feel completely safe in their assumption that they can simply erase another race from existence." The tactical implications were staggering. The Council Assembly Complex was located on Prime's primary continent, protected by planetary defense shields that could withstand bombardment from entire fleets. Getting close enough to target it would require fighting through layer after layer of defensive systems. But Sarah was beginning to understand the true genius of Harrison's plan. It wasn't really about destroying the assembly complex. though that would be a remarkable achievement. It was about demonstrating human nature to a galaxy that had fundamentally misunderstood what they were dealing with. "Sir," came a voice from the communication station, "we're receiving a transmission from the Council fleet. They're requesting to speak with our commanding officer." Harrison's expression hardened. "Put it through." The main screen flickered and then displayed the image of Ambassador, the who had delivered humanity's death sentence. Behind him, Sarah could see what appeared to be the bridge of a massive warship, probably a Council command vessel. "Admiral Harrison's translated voice carried the usual diplomatic tone that Sarah had learned to despise over the years. "I am authorized to offer humanity a final opportunity to surrender. If your ships disperse immediately and your species submits to Council authority, we are prepared to offer a more merciful alternative to complete extinction." Harrison studied the alien ambassador for a long moment before responding. "What kind of alternative?" "Forced relocation to a single world under Council supervision. Your breeding would be regulated to prevent future population growth, and your technological development would be permanently restricted. It is far more generous than your species deserves." Sarah felt anger rising in her chest. The offer was slavery, pure and simple. Humanity reduced to a small, controlled population living under alien oversight, their children raised to accept subjugation as natural and proper. "I see," Harrison said calmly. "And this offer comes because you've reconsidered your assessment of humanity as a galactic threat." "Not at all," replied. "This offer comes because several Council members believe that complete genocide, while justified, sets a dangerous precedent. Better to demonstrate that the Council can be merciful to those who submit properly." The ambassador's words hung in the air, and Sarah could feel the rage building not just in herself, but across every ship in the human fleet. They weren't even being offered this fake mercy out of respect or fear. They were being offered it as a political demonstration. "Thank you for clarifying that," Harrison said, his voice still perfectly controlled. "I'm afraid we must decline your generous offer." His expression shifted to something resembling confusion. "Admiral, you cannot seriously believe you can resist the combined might of the Galactic Council. Your fleet is barely a fraction of the size of a single Council member's navy." Harrison smiled, and Sarah recognized the expression from years of serving under him. It was the smile he got just before doing something that would probably get him court-martialed under normal circumstances. "Ambassador," Harrison said, "I don't think you truly understand what humanity is. You've studied our expansion patterns, our diplomatic communications, our trade agreements. You think you know us because you've observed our civilization, but you've never seen what we become when survival is on the line. Admiral, you are being irrational. Your species' survival instincts should tell you to accept our offer rather than face certain destruction." "Our survival instincts," Harrison replied, "are telling us to fight. You see, Ambassador, humans evolved on a world where almost everything was trying to kill us. Ice ages, predators, diseases, natural disasters, other humans. We spent hundreds of thousands of years learning that the only way to survive was to be more dangerous than anything hunting us." Sarah could see confusion growing on his face. The concept seemed to be genuinely foreign to him. "You and your Council made a fundamental error," Harrison continued. "You assumed that because we're young and small, we must also be weak. You assumed that because we haven't been playing galactic politics we don't understand power. But you're about to learn something that every predator on Earth learned eventually." "Which is?" Harrison's smile became sharp enough to cut steel. "Humans are not prey animals, Ambassador. We never were, we never will be. And when you corner a predator, you'd better be prepared for what happens next." The transmission cut off, leaving the bridge in tense silence. Sarah looked around at her crew and saw the same fierce pride she felt burning in her own chest. Whatever happened in the next few hours, they would face it as humans, unbroken, unrepentant, and absolutely unwilling to go quietly into the dark. "All ships," Harrison announced to the fleet, "prepare for hyperspace jump to Prime. Today, we show the galaxy what happens when humanity stands against impossible odds." As the fleet began its final preparations, Sarah found herself thinking about all the human colonies that would be destroyed while they were making their desperate attack. Billions would die while they were attempting this madness. But maybe, just maybe, their sacrifice would ensure that humanity's last act would be one that the galaxy would never forget. The countdown began, and 437 ships prepared to emerge from hyperspace in the most defended system in galactic history. They were about to attempt something that would be remembered either as the most glorious last stand ever recorded, or as the most spectacular military disaster in history. Either way, it would be unmistakably human. The system erupted into chaos as 437 human ships materialized from hyperspace simultaneously. Captain Sarah gripped her command chair as the UES Defiance's sensors came online, revealing the true scope of what they faced. Prime hung before them like a jewel, its blue-green surface protected by a network of defense platforms that comprehension. Massive orbital stations, each larger than Luna Station, formed concentric rings around the planet. Energy readings showed shield generators powerful enough to protect entire continents. But what truly took Sarah's breath away was the sheer number of ships. "Admiral," Commander Torres reported from the sensor station, his voice tight with controlled terror. "I'm reading over 3,000 Council vessels in system, everything from patrol craft to dreadnoughts. And sir, some of these energy signatures are beyond our classification system." Sarah studied the tactical display as red dots representing enemy forces began appearing faster than the computer could count them. The human fleet had materialized in the outer asteroid belt as planned, giving them precious minutes before the Council forces could respond. But those minutes were ticking away rapidly. "All ships begin attack run," Admiral Harrison ordered over the fleet communication channel. "Remember, we only need to reach the planet's surface. Every ship that gets through the orbital defenses is a victory." The human fleet began accelerating toward Prime, and Sarah felt the familiar sensation of her ship's engines straining against the laws of physics. Around them, the other vessels of humanity's last fleet formed into attack formations that had been practiced over generations of Earth's wars. The first sign that their presence had been detected came when the defense platforms began rotating to track their approach. Weapon systems that had been dormant for centuries suddenly came online, their energy signatures creating false sunrises across the fleet's sensors. "Enemy vessels are responding," Torres announced. "Estimated time to weapons range 14 minutes. 14 minutes. Sarah had trained for space combat her entire career, but she had never imagined anything on this scale. The Council's response fleet alone was 7 times larger than the entire human navy, and they were just the mobile forces. The fixed defenses represented technology that was literally beyond human understanding. "Captain," Lieutenant Shaw called from the navigation station, "I'm picking up some kind of gravitational distortion ahead. The space around Prime isn't behaving normally." Sarah checked her own sensors and felt her stomach drop. The readings showed gravity fields that twisted and bent in impossible patterns around the planet. It was some kind of defensive system that could apparently alter the fundamental laws of physics in local space. "All ships be advised," Harrison's voice carried across the communication channels. "The enemy has activated spatial distortion fields. Navigation computers will be unreliable within 10 million kilometers of the target. Switch to manual control and follow visual references." Sarah had heard about such technology in theoretical discussions, but seeing it in action was something else entirely. The space around Prime was becoming a maze of distorted spacetime, designed to trap incoming vessels in gravitational loops or tear them apart with tidal forces. The first human ships to encounter the distortion field learned its effects the hard way. Sarah watched in horror as the destroyer UES Valiant simply vanished, not destroyed, but apparently translated to some other location entirely. The converted freighter New Horizon began tumbling end over end as its navigation systems failed completely. "Sir," Torres reported, "we're losing ships to the spatial anomalies. Current count shows 23 vessels displaced or destroyed." "Continue the advance," Harrison ordered grimly. "We expected heavy losses." The Council's mobile fleet was closing rapidly now, their sleek vessels moving with the precision that came from thousands of years of military tradition. Sarah could see weapons charging on ships that were beautiful in their alien design, graceful curves and flowing lines that made human vessels look crude and primitive by comparison. But as the first exchange of fire began, Sarah started to understand what Admiral Harrison had meant about galactic military doctrine. The Council ships approached the engagement like a formal battle between civilized opponents. They formed neat formations, targeted specific ship systems with precision weapons, and clearly expected the humans to respond with similar tactical discipline. Instead, the human fleet did something that horrified their enemies and probably violated several thousand years of civilized warfare conventions. They scattered. Every human ship suddenly changed course independently, abandoning all formation discipline and charging toward the planet in seemingly random directions. Some accelerated directly toward the largest enemy vessels on collision courses. Others dove toward the planet's surface at angles that would normally be considered suicidal. A few actually turned around and began attacking the Council forces from behind. The effect on the enemy was immediate and devastating. Council ships that had been maneuvering to engage specific targets suddenly found themselves trying to track dozens of unpredictable opponents. Their sophisticated tactical computers, designed to predict and counter organized military strategies, simply couldn't process what they were seeing. "This is Captain of the Artemis," came a voice over the communication channel. "I'm making a direct run at that big station on the planet's North Pole. If anyone wants to follow me into hell, now would be a good time." Sarah watched as the small destroyer accelerated toward what appeared to be a massive orbital defense platform, its weapons firing continuously even though it was still far out of effective range. 3 other human ships immediately changed course to follow, their own weapons adding to the barrage. The platform's defensive systems activated, creating a wall of energy that should have vaporized the attacking ships instantly. Instead, Sarah watched in amazement as the Artemis somehow weaved through the defensive fire, its pilot using maneuvers that no sane spacer would attempt. The ship was spinning, diving, and accelerating in patterns that seemed to defy not just military doctrine but physics itself. "How is doing that?" she asked aloud. "He's not following any standard evasion pattern," Torres replied, his voice filled with admiration and terror. "He's flying like someone who doesn't care if he lives or dies." And that, Sarah realized, was exactly the point. Council ships were piloted by beings who had known peace and prosperity for. They fought to win, certainly, but they also fought to survive and return home to their families. Human pilots, facing the extinction of their entire species, were fighting with the desperate fury of cornered animals. The UES Thor's Hammer, one of Earth's oldest dreadnoughts, suddenly appeared on Sarah's display as it emerged from behind a Council battleship 3 times its size. Instead of engaging in a proper naval duel, the ancient human vessel had somehow maneuvered to point-blank range and was now firing everything it had directly into the enemy ship's engine core. "Thor's hammer to all ships," came Captain's voice, calm despite the fact that his vessel was being torn apart by return fire. "I'm reading critical damage to this battleship's main reactor. Recommend immediate withdrawal from this area." The Council battleship's destruction was visible across half the star system, a miniature nova that briefly sun. But even as they celebrated the victory, Sarah could see that the human fleet was being systematically destroyed. They had lost over 100 ships in the first 10 minutes of engagement. "Admiral," she called to Harrison, "we're not going to make it to the planet's surface. The losses are too heavy." Harrison studied the tactical display for a moment, watching as red dots representing human ships winked out of existence one by one. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of command decisions that no officer should ever have to make. "Captain, I want you to take a small group of ships and attempt to reach the Council assembly complex. Use the chaos to cover your approach." "Sir, what about the rest of the fleet?" "The rest of the fleet is going to do what humans do best when facing impossible odds," Harrison replied. "We're going to make the enemy pay such a price for victory that they'll regret ever hearing the name of our species." Sarah felt something cold settle in her stomach as she realized what the Admiral was proposing. The main fleet would continue its seemingly suicidal attack, drawing the attention of the Council forces while a small group attempted to complete the primary mission. "Admiral, I can't leave you two." "Captain, that's an order. Take the Defiance and whatever ships can follow you. Make our sacrifice count." Around them, the battle continued to rage with an intensity that description. Human ships were dying by the dozens, but they were taking Council vessels with them in ways that clearly shocked their enemies. The destroyer UES Ranger had somehow attached itself to a Council cruiser and was systematically destroying it from the inside. The converted cargo hauler Pride of New Tokyo was using its massive size to ram smaller enemy vessels, its hull splitting apart, but its engines still driving forward. "All ships, this is Captain," Sarah announced to the fleet. "Any vessels still capable of atmospheric entry form on the Defiance for a direct assault on the planetary surface." 18 ships responded to her call, a mixed group of destroyers, corvettes, and converted civilian vessels. It was a pitifully small force to assault the most defended world in galactic history, but it was what they had. As they began their descent toward Prime's atmosphere, Sarah looked back at the main battle one last time. Admiral Harrison's flagship was engaged in a point-blank duel with 3 Council dreadnoughts, its hull glowing white-hot from weapons fire, but its guns still blazing defiance. The sight filled her with a fierce pride that burned away her fear. Whatever happened in the next few minutes, humanity would not be remembered as a species that had begged for mercy or died quietly. They would be remembered as the race that had looked into the face of extinction and charged anyway. Prime's atmosphere embraced the 18 surviving human ships like a lover's welcome, but Sarah knew that the real fight was just beginning. Somewhere below them lay the Council Assembly Complex, and with it, humanity's last chance to leave a mark on galactic history that could never be erased. The 18 human ships that survived the orbital battle screamed through Prime's atmosphere like falling meteors. Captain Sarah watched her hull temperature readings climb into dangerous territory as the UES Defiance fought its way through atmospheric entry protocols that had never been designed for combat landings. "Captain," Lieutenant Shaw called from navigation, "I'm reading massive energy signatures across the continent. Ground-based defense systems are coming online." Through the bridge viewport, Sarah could see the surface of the Council spread out below them like something from a dream. Crystalline cities stretched across continents in geometric patterns that seemed to follow mathematical principles rather than organic growth. Floating platforms connected towering spires that reached toward the sky like metallic flowers. It was beautiful in a way that human architecture had never achieved, perfect and serene and utterly alien. And somewhere in that perfection lay the Council Assembly Complex, the seat of galactic government that had sentenced humanity to extinction. "Target confirmed," Tors announced from the sensor station. "The assembly complex is located on the primary continent, coordinates marking now. It appears to be a cluster of interconnected buildings surrounding a central amphitheater." Sarah studied the tactical display as their destination came into view. The Council Assembly Complex was even more impressive than she had imagined, a sprawling campus of structures that seemed to shift and flow like living things. The central amphitheater was a massive dome that appeared to be made of some kind of translucent crystal, glowing with internal light. "Ma'am," Shaw reported urgently, "ground defenses are targeting us. Energy weapons, projectile systems, and something else I can't identify." The first defensive barrage lit up the sky around them like a deadly fireworks display. Sarah felt the ship shudder as energy beams barely missed their hull, leaving the air around them ionized and crackling with residual power. Whatever technology the Council used for planetary defense, it was orders of magnitude beyond anything humanity had developed. "All ships, evasive maneuvers," Sarah ordered to the small fleet following them down. "Stay low and use the city structures for cover." It was a desperate gamble, but Sarah was counting on the Council's reluctance to damage their own infrastructure. Flying between the towering spires and floating platforms of the alien cities, the human ships began a deadly game of three-dimensional hide and seek with defense systems that could vaporize them instantly. The corvette UES Sparrow, piloted by Commander Park, suddenly veered between 2 crystalline towers and vanished in a burst of light. When the afterglow faded, there was nothing left but a small crater in the perfectly maintained city street below. 17 ships remaining, Tors reported grimly. Sarah pushed the Defiance through a turn that would have been impossible in normal gravity, using the ship's engines to essentially fall sideways between buildings that towered kilometers above them. Around her, the surviving ships of humanity's last assault force followed her lead, their pilots performing maneuvers that would have been considered reckless insanity under any other circumstances. "Captain," Shaw called out, "I'm reading something unusual. The city's automated systems appear to be trying to redirect civilian traffic away from our path." Sarah blinked in surprise. It hadn't occurred to her that there might be innocent civilians in the path of their attack. The thought of alien families, perhaps watching news reports about the human invasion, never expecting the war to come to their peaceful, For a moment, she felt a stab of something that might have been guilt. Then she remembered the 37 billion human souls that these same civilians had casually voted to exterminate, and her resolve hardened once again. "Continue approach," she ordered. The destroyer UES Ranger, commanded by Captain Williams, was the next to fall. A defensive beam caught it as it emerged from cover behind a floating platform, and the ship simply ceased to exist, its atoms scattered across several city blocks. But Williams' sacrifice had revealed the location of a major defense installation, and the converted freighter New Manila immediately altered course to take it out. Sarah watched as the civilian vessel, retrofitted with military weapons by its volunteer crew, slammed into the defense platform in a kamikaze attack that lit up the horizon. The explosion took out an entire section of the city's defensive grid, opening a corridor toward their target. 15 ships, Torres updated. The Council Assembly Complex was growing larger on their screens now, and Sarah could see that it was even more massive than the long-range scans had suggested. The central dome appeared to be several kilometers across, surrounded by smaller structures that twisted and curved in patterns that hurt to look at directly. "Ma'am," Torres called urgently, "I'm reading life signs in the assembly complex, thousands of them. The council session is currently in progress." Sarah felt her heart skip a beat. They had hoped to find the complex empty, to destroy the symbol of galactic government without adding mass murder to humanity's final act. But of course the council would be meeting now, probably discussing the progress of humanity's extermination. "How many?" she asked. "Preliminary scans show approximately 43,000 beings in the main amphitheater, representing every major species in the galaxy. There are probably support staff, security forces, and other personnel throughout the complex." 43,000. Sarah closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of the decision before her. Attacking the complex while it was occupied wouldn't just be destroying a building. It would be genocide on a scale that would make her no better than the council members who had sentenced humanity to death. "Captain," came Commander's voice over the communication channel from the destroyer Artemis, "I'm reading the same life sign data. Orders." Sarah opened her eyes and looked at the alien city spread out below them, beautiful and serene, and completely unaware that representatives of its civilization had just tried to erase an entire species from existence. She thought about her daughter back on Earth, probably already dead as council fleets systematically destroyed human colonies. She thought about all the human children who would never grow up, all the dreams that would never be fulfilled, all the potential that would be lost forever. "Target confirmed," she said into her communicator, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was ordering. "All ships begin final attack run on the assembly complex." The remaining 14 ships of humanity's fleet formed into a loose formation as they approached their target. The assembly complex grew larger and larger until it filled their entire field of view, its crystalline dome gleaming like a jewel in the alien sun. "Captain," Torres said quietly, "incoming transmission from the complex. They're requesting communication." Sarah hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Put it through." The main screen flickered and displayed the interior of what appeared to be the council assembly chamber. Sarah found herself looking at the most diverse gathering of sentient life she had ever seen. Beings of every conceivable shape, size, and apparent biology filled row after row of seats in the massive amphitheater. At the center of the chamber stood Ambassador, the who had delivered humanity's death sentence. His expression was calm, almost resigned, as he looked directly into the camera. "Captain," his translated voice carried the same diplomatic tone she remembered from their earlier conversation. "You have achieved something that was believed to be impossible. You have successfully assaulted the council and reached the assembly complex itself." Sarah said nothing, waiting for him to continue. "I am authorized to inform you that the council has voted to reconsider its decision regarding humanity. Your species' demonstration of military capability has caused several members to question whether complete extermination is the appropriate response to your expansion." "What are you offering?" Sarah asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. "Complete surrender of your fleet and acceptance of the relocation terms I offered Admiral Harrison. In exchange, the systematic destruction of human colonies will be suspended pending further deliberation." Sarah looked around her bridge at the faces of her crew. She could see the desperate hope in their eyes, the possibility that their species might still survive, even if only as prisoners. It was more than they had expected when this mission began. But it was also exactly what she had feared they would offer. "Ambassador," Sarah said slowly, "you're making this offer because we proved we could hurt you. Not because you decided our lives have value, but because you're afraid of what we might do if you continue trying to exterminate us." "The reasoning behind the offer is irrelevant," replied. "What matters is that your species can survive. As slaves, as a managed population under council supervision, it is far more than you deserve." Sarah felt that familiar burning anger rising in her chest, the same rage that had driven humanity to attempt this impossible mission in the first place. They were still being offered survival as a gift from their betters, charity from beings who considered themselves humanity's superiors. "Ambassador," Sarah said, her voice carrying the weight of every human who had ever refused to bow to a stronger opponent, "I want you to understand something about my species. We didn't come here to negotiate. We didn't come here to beg for mercy or acceptance." She paused, looking directly into the camera that she knew was broadcasting her words to every member species of the galactic government. "We came here to deliver a message, and that message is this: if you want to destroy humanity, you're going to have to earn it. Every human life you take, we're going to make you pay for. Every colony you destroy, we're going to hurt you back. You may be older than us, you may be more advanced than us, you may outnumber us by factors that make this conversation absurd." Sarah's voice rose as she continued, carrying the fury and pride of her entire species. "But we are not your property to dispose of. We are not a problem for you to solve. We are human beings and we bow to no one, ever." The transmission ended, and Sarah turned to her weapons officer. "Lieutenant," she said quietly, "target the central dome, maximum yield." As the 14 remaining ships of humanity's last fleet began their final attack run, Sarah felt a strange sense of peace settle over her. They had delivered their message. Whatever happened next, the galaxy would remember the day that humanity stood against impossible odds and refused to surrender. The Council Assembly complex rushed toward them like destiny itself, and Sarah smiled as she prepared to show 43,000 of the galaxy's leaders exactly what humans did when cornered. Final assault on the Council Assembly complex lasted exactly 4 minutes and 37 seconds. Captain Sarah would remember that timing for the rest of her life, which turned out to be considerably longer than she had expected. The 14 remaining human ships dove toward the crystalline dome like avenging angels, their weapons systems charging for what everyone aboard believed would be their final act. Sarah watched the target grow larger on her screen, preparing to give the order that would destroy the seat of galactic government and everyone inside it. Then something impossible happened. The dome didn't explode when their missiles struck it. Instead, it absorbed them, the crystal structure somehow converting the destructive energy into brilliant light that pulsed through the entire complex like a heartbeat. The building began to glow, brighter and brighter, until it was like looking directly into a star. "Captain," Torres called from his sensor station, his voice filled with confusion, "the weapons are having no effect. The crystal is absorbing all incoming energy and converting it to some other form." Sarah stared at the display in shock. Their most powerful weapons, capable of cracking asteroids and destroying orbital stations, were being casually absorbed by the alien architecture, as if they were flashlights shining on a mirror. "All ships continue attack," she ordered, though doubt was beginning to creep into her voice. The converted freighter New Horizon, commanded by Captain Santos, attempted a ramming attack on one of the smaller buildings surrounding the dome. Instead of destroying the structure, the ship seemed to pass through it partially before coming to a stop, embedded in the crystalline walls like an insect trapped in amber. "Santos to Fleet Command," came the captain's voice over the communication channel. "We're stuck inside the building somehow, but we're still alive. The structure isn't solid matter as we understand it." Before Sarah could process this information, her own ship shuddered as something grabbed hold of it. The UES Defiance was suddenly caught in some kind of energy field that brought it to a complete stop just meters from the dome's surface. "Captain," Shaw reported from navigation, "we've lost engine power. Something is holding us in place." One by one, the remaining ships of humanity's fleet found themselves trapped in similar energy fields, suspended around the assembly complex like toys in the hands of giants. Sarah realized with growing amazement that they hadn't been destroyed or damaged in any way. They had simply been caught. "This is Ambassador," came a familiar voice over the communication system. "Captain, you and your crews are requested to transport down to the assembly chamber. Your ships will remain safe while you are aboard." Sarah looked around at her bridge crew, seeing her own confusion reflected in their faces. This wasn't how last stands were supposed to end. There should have been fire and death and glorious destruction, not polite requests for diplomatic meetings. "Sir," Tor said quietly, "I'm reading transporter signatures. They're beaming us down whether we agree or not." The familiar tingle of alien transporter technology washed over Sarah's body, and she found herself standing in the vast amphitheater she had seen on the communication screen. Around her, she could see other human officers materializing from the scattered ships of their fleet, all looking as confused and disoriented as she felt. The assembly chamber was even more impressive in person. Thousands of beings from dozens of different species filled the terrace seats that rose up around the central floor where the humans now stood. Sarah had never seen such diversity of life in one place, from the towering, crystalline, to the small, furry creatures that appeared to be the size of earth squirrels. Ambassador approached their group, his movements carrying the same diplomatic grace that Sarah remembered from their earlier encounters. But there was something different about his demeanor now, something that might have been respect. "Captain," he said, inclining his head in what appeared to be a formal greeting, "you have accomplished something remarkable today." "We failed," Sarah replied bluntly. "We couldn't even scratch your building." "On the contrary," gestured toward the glowing dome above them, "you have succeeded in ways you cannot possibly understand. This complex is more than just a government building. It is a testing facility designed by the Forerunners millions of years ago to evaluate developing civilizations." Sarah felt her world shift as the implications of his words began to sink in. Testing facility. The crystal dome you attempted to destroy is a measurement device. It analyzes the nature of any species that attacks it, reading not just their technology but their fundamental character, their deepest motivations, their true potential. Turned to address not just the humans but the entire assembly, his voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber. "The test that humanity just underwent has only been attempted 17 times in galactic history. Most species never develop the capability to reach this world. Of those that do, most choose negotiation over direct assault. Only 4 species before humanity have ever actually attacked the assembly complex." He paused, letting the significance of that number settle over the gathered representatives. Of those 4, 3 were deemed too dangerous to coexist with other civilizations and were eliminated. The 4th was judged to possess the proper balance of courage and restraint necessary for true membership in galactic society. Sarah's mind was reeling. Everything they had believed about this mission, about the Council's decision to exterminate humanity, about their desperate last stand, had been wrong. "The Council's vote to eliminate humanity was not a final judgment," continued. "It was a provocation, designed to force your species to reveal its true nature under ultimate pressure. We needed to know whether humans would choose surrender, negotiation, or resistance when faced with extinction." "You were testing us," Sarah said slowly, the full scope of the deception beginning to dawn on her. "We were evaluating you. Every expanding species reaches a point where their nature must be fully understood before they can be trusted with true galactic citizenship. Most species reveal themselves through diplomatic interactions, trade negotiations, or cultural exchanges. Humanity required more extreme circumstances." Sarah thought about Admiral Harrison and the hundreds of ships that had died in the orbital battle, about the billions of humans on the colonies who believed they were about to be exterminated, about her own daughter back on Earth who was probably watching news reports about humanity's final hours. "The fleet in orbit," she said, her voice tight with controlled fury, "the deaths, the battle. Were entirely real," confirmed. "The Council forces had orders to defend the system with lethal force. If humanity had chosen surrender or attempted to flee, the evaluation would have ended with your species' relocation to a supervised world. If you had attacked civilian targets or shown evidence of genuine genocidal intent, you would have been eliminated." But we chose to attack the symbol of authority directly, Sarah realized. You chose to strike at the heart of power while minimizing civilian casualties. Your Admiral Harrison could have targeted any number of population centers that would have been far easier to destroy. Instead, you focused your assault on the government that had threatened your existence. That choice revealed more about human character than centuries of diplomatic observation. Around the chamber, Sarah could see alien representatives leaning forward in their seats, clearly fascinated by this revelation. She realized that most of them probably hadn't known about the true nature of the test either. Furthermore, continued, your species' performance in the actual battle exceeded all projections. Council military analysts estimated that the human fleet would be destroyed within the first 30 minutes of engagement. Instead, you inflicted casualties that will require months to replace and demonstrated tactical innovations that our strategists are still analyzing. Sarah thought about the chaotic nature of humanity's assault, the way they had abandoned all military doctrine in favor of individual initiative and desperate courage. We fought like barbarians, she said. You fought like survivors, corrected. More importantly, you fought like a species that refuses to accept defeat even when faced with impossible odds. The galaxy has been at peace for so long that many civilizations have forgotten what it means to face existential threats. Humanity's demonstration today has reminded us all of the value of that knowledge. The ambassador turned to address the full assembly once again. The measurement is complete. Humanity has demonstrated the three qualities necessary for true galactic citizenship: the wisdom to minimize unnecessary casualties, the courage to resist oppression regardless of odds, and the tactical flexibility to adapt to situations beyond their previous experience. A murmur ran through the gathered representatives, and Sarah could hear what sounded like approval in the alien voices. Therefore, announced formally, the Galactic Council votes to grant humanity full membership status, with all the rights, responsibilities, and protections that such membership entails. The vote, when it came, was unanimous. 43 species that had supposedly decided to exterminate humanity just hours earlier now welcomed them as equals in the galactic community. Sarah stood in the center of the vast chamber, surrounded by her surviving crew, and felt a mixture of relief, exhaustion, and anger that left her temporarily speechless. They had been manipulated, tested, and pushed to the very brink of species extinction, all so that alien bureaucrats could measure their character. But they had passed. Against all odds, despite facing technology and numbers that should have made victory impossible, humanity had proven itself worthy of a place among the stars. Captain approached her personally. I realize that this revelation may be difficult to accept. Your species has suffered real losses today, and many humans will struggle to forgive the deception that made those losses necessary. Sarah looked at the alien diplomat, this being who represented civilizations older than human history, and felt something settle in her chest that might have been understanding. Ambassador, she said finally, I think you underestimate humanity's capacity for forgiveness. We're also pretty good at learning from our mistakes. Then you accept the Council's judgment and humanity's new status. Sarah smiled, thinking of all the human colonies that would now be safe, all the children who would grow up with the stars as their playground, all the potential that her species could now fulfill. We accept, she said, but next time you want to test us, maybe start with something a little less dramatic. His expression shifted into what Sarah realized was the alien equivalent of laughter. Captain, he said, I suspect that humanity will provide quite enough drama for the galaxy without any assistance from us. As the assembly chamber erupted in what passed for applause among 43 different species, Sarah allowed herself to believe, for the first time in days, that humanity's future among the stars was going to be very interesting indeed.